Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Very good to be here. Very good to see everyone. So this has been a very interesting week for me. Susanna was a witness when I panicked, when I learned that I was the speaker this week, a week ago. There was a little communication glitch we had, and so I had a week to prepare, but it's been a wonderful week, let me tell you that. I'm blessed that I have the honor to speak about Emmanuel. I hope I've learned enough to be able to share with you what I've learned, and I know I can also count on the experts who are here. So, because there's so much work that has been given us by Emmanuel through the hands of Chico Xavier that is impossible for a short person like me to be able to, understand and capture, but it did make me very excited about reading the books that I haven't read yet. So I may be sharing information that may not be 100% accurate, in which case you guys can raise your hand and say, Eduardo, that's not exactly what the book says, and I won't feel that personally. But I also, there's also a couple very important messages that Emmanuel leaves us. And again, I'm so blessed because Anna, you made my talk so much easier because you basically summed up what my last two slides are. So keep in mind what we just heard from Anna, because I could not find a better way to put it the way she did. But that's the message that Emmanuel has left us. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a few slides that attempt to present who is Emmanuel. Right? So who is Emmanuel? Well, where have we seen Emmanuel? So we've seen Emmanuel a couple times, at least represented by actors. So once is in this movie Nosso Lar. For those of us who have seen the movie, we see him talking to André Luiz. Now, I should say that was never in the book, but it is in the movie, and it's very likely that they've met in spirit. It doesn't hurt, right? But just to highlight that we see him in the movie is not really in the book. And we also see him in the movie about Chico Xavier's life. And this is the moment when Chico sees Emmanuel for the first time. So he's near, I believe, a lake or a dam. And in 1931, that's when Emmanuel reveals himself to Chico Xavier and tells him about the work that he is about to begin. And that's when they have the famous conversation about, Emmanuel asks him, are you ready to commit? And if you are, there are three things that you need to know, that you need to display. And Chico says, what's the first one? He says, discipline. And he says, what's the second one? Discipline. And what's the third one? Discipline. We saw that last week when Susanna showed us the videos. And that was true. And that was absolutely true. And Emmanuel then becomes really the guide, right? The protector, the guide to Chico Xavier. And he guides Chico's work throughout the next 75 years, where Chico, profusely produces all this great work. It's all carefully managed by Emmanuel, and we need to understand why. It's because of the importance of the work that he was going to leave us, and because of the level of discipline that it would take to produce all of that. So without the steady guiding hand of Emmanuel, probably no spirit, not diminishing Chico, who is a great man in spirit, but no one would be able to accomplish what Chico accomplished without that level of help. And again, it's very difficult to talk about Emmanuel without recapping some of Chico's work, because Emmanuel is revealed to us through the work of Chico. We only know about Emmanuel because of the work that Chico has given us. So as we saw last week, and for those of you who were not here, so this is a quick recap. Chico Xavier is considered to be the greatest medium of all times. He left more than 400 books dictated by spirits. The books, there are many categories of the books, and we'll see some of them here. The first one, actually, being called Parnaso of the Alain Túmulo, or I don't know how to say that in English, but it is a collection of poems dictated by more than 40 dead poets. And again, he wrote that at a very early age, and lots of scientists there's a little kid there. Hey. or lots of people who study literature attested to the fact that they were legitimate. Right? They were written they followed the same style, the same basic message that those poets would have left in life. And then there is another book that it's considered, all of the books are incredible, and we're going to see some of them, but the book Paul and Stephen, which we have here in the library, was considered by Herculano Pires, for example. He said that, and I'll quote his words here. So Herculano Pires says that the mission of Chico Xavier would have been justified on earth if he had published just this one book. It's so important, and it is, for those of us who have read the book. It's a historical treatise on early Christianity. I cannot describe to you, if you haven't read it, how beautiful it is and how enlightening it is for us to understand what happened after Christ left earth, and the early work that the disciples have to do, especially the work that Paul, or Saul, who then became Paul, did, and how that was important for the spreading of Christianity in the world. And feel free to interject, guys.
What was the book called, the one that you just mentioned right now?
Paul and Stephen, Paulo and Estevão. Yeah, and we have here in the library.
In English.
In English.
It's of America.
Yep. Edisei has yep.
A little ad.
A little ad. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It is thick. It's about 600 and so pages, but
you cry.
You cry the whole book. That's the thing. Yeah.
No,
I cry. No, I cry too. I'll tell you this. It's an unbelievable book. Unbelievable. Even if you don't believe in Spiritism, that's why I tell people, if you just want to understand history, early Christianity, you don't have to believe a word of Spiritism. It is in itself a treatise in early Christianity. Okay, so we'll take you through Emmanuel's journey, and a lot of the information, or all of the information that I'm going to share with you moving forward, comes from books, also comes from conversations that Chico Xavier had with friends, and some interviews that Chico provided. So obviously you may imagine that there is some controversy around the sources of some of this information. And we're not going to focus on that. We're not trying to prove or disprove that information is correct. But in its totality, it's going to be very clear that it depicts a trajectory of enlightenment, of evolution. And this is what is left to us, is to see how a spirit can transform throughout time, and the beauty and the role of reincarnation. It shows us, and I don't think we have another example, at least not in Spiritist literature, that shows us the trajectory of a single spirit throughout many centuries. This is about 3,000 years that we're going to cover here. So I don't think we have another one. And that's the beauty of this example, is to see how a spirit can transform. So the first known incarnation from Emmanuel is in the 9th century before Christ. So again, about 3,000 years ago, when he is a grand priest in Egypt, in a temple of Amon-Ra, and he is director of a school and father of the future queen of the Assyrian Empire, which at that point it was a vast empire, right? It covered a lot of Europe, a lot of the Middle Eastern, a lot of Asia. And we learn about that incarnation through a book from Camilo Rodriguez Chavez. But we really come to learn about Emmanuel is in the book 2,000 years, right? So 2,000 years ago, which we also have, Odyssey of America, bling bling, it's available. It's another book, another tremendous book, fantastic book. I haven't read, but I watched my wife read, and she was crying all the time. I said, I'm not gonna read this book. You're crying all the time. No, I need you to read this book. So I consulted with her on many of the pieces of information that I have here. And in this book, we learn about a character by the name of Publius Lentulus. And interesting enough, and for some people a little confusing, he shows two incarnations in the same book. So he comes as his great-father and then the great-grandson. And so first he comes as Publius Lentulus Sura, who is the great-grandfather, and he's involved in a political plot where he joins a conspiration, and they attempt to set Rome on fire. It doesn't work. He's caught, and then he's sentenced to death. He dies, and he reincarnates as his grandson, Publius Lentulus Cornelius, and that's really the main character of the book. Just a side joke, a Spiritist joke. I was telling my kids that in Spiritist doctrine, in the novels, everybody dies at the beginning or at the end, right? But everybody dies. Otherwise, there's no story, right? So in this book, we learn that he holds an important position. He's the proconsul of Judea. So he goes to the Judea, I guess that's how you say it, area, right, or territory. That's where Jesus is. So he's there with his wife, who is Livia, and his two children, Flavia and Marcus. Now, the book tells a series of tragedies. He goes through an enormous amount of tragedies in his life. His son is kidnapped early on. He never hears about his son anymore for a long time. His daughter is diagnosed with lepers, Flavia. And is this illness that causes his wife, Flavia, to really become desperate. And then she listens to the advice of a helper, who is Anna, that says, you need to meet with this man, Jesus, because he cures people. So she tells him about all these beautiful things that Jesus does, and she says, I'm going to see Christ. She goes and meets Christ, and she hears his words, and she falls in love with his message, and she comes back to his wife, her husband, Publius Lentulus, and says, you need to see him, you need to take our daughter there. And he's a very proud man. He has a lot of pride in his heart. His heart is very hard. It's a hardened heart. And he resists a lot. He finally goes and sees Jesus and takes his daughter. She's cured. And he's touched by that, but still doesn't give in to Jesus' messages. And let me pause here. At the beginning of the book, Emmanuel says, right, I hope it's in the preface, that he says that he's going to talk about his memories, right, 2,000 years ago. And he says that, to me, those memories have been very tender, as well as very bitter. Gentle for the friendly remembrances, but deeply painful, considering that my hardened heart did not know how to take advantage of this radiant moment that had rung in the clock of my spiritist life 2,000 years ago. Because he met with the Christ. He had an opportunity to change there, and he feels that he missed it. Of course, we're going to see that he works hard for the next several incarnations to redeem himself. But looking back and understanding that he had that opportunity, he had the Christ in front of him. He could have converted immediately. He cured his daughter, for God's sake, right? It's not that he heard about the man. He saw what he did, and still he was so proud that he wouldn't accept Jesus. That, to me, is also a message for us. How many times are we greeted with this opportunity? And either we are not ready or we choose not to pay attention. And again, we'll be given another opportunity and another opportunity and another opportunity. But let's not wait too long, right? Let's ask ourselves, am I having this opportunity right now? What do I need to make the decision? He didn't really need anything. He had everything he needed to make the decision. It was just his choice not to make that decision. And again, he regrets later on. Up to this day, he regrets. Not, I think regret is a heavy word. He ponders about the choice that he had at that point. So it's something that's left to us. Well, what happens next again, the tragedies continue. And that's why we cry and cry when we read this book, because there's a plot to make him think that his wife is cheating on him. So that creates a disagreement. She leaves the house. He doesn't see her for a while. And this is when Nero is persecuting the Christians at that point. And she becomes a Christian. She goes to secret meetings with the Christians. And at that point, as we know, that's when they were throwing the Christians in the arena to be eaten by the lions. They were burning them alive. And in one of those occurrences, the senator or the proconsul, Publius Lentulus Cornelius, he is watching one of those occurrences next to Nero, and that's when he sees his wife. He's like, I think that's my wife. And sure enough, he watches his wife be executed, basically, in front of him. And at that point, again, he goes into deep sorrow. And that continues to be part of his transformation, right? Seeing that happen, realizing what had happened. He goes back, I guess, to Rome, then he goes back to Judea, and in another tragedy, he's arrested. And his son, he finds his son, who was part of the ones who had been arrested previously, and his captors force his son to blind him, which is another tragedy. So he goes blind through the hands of his own son. And finally, now converted to a follower of Christ in the year 79, they are near the Mount Vesuvius, so the volcano erupts, and that's when the helper Anna, his daughter Flavia, and himself pass away. That's when they discarnate. It's a sad book. Okay, so he then comes back 50 years later. That's another book which is translated and is available at the Sale of America. I'm sorry, you started it. So in this book, he comes back in the year 131 after Christ, and he is a Greek slave. He is Nestorius, and he's kept by this family, and he's in Alexandria, and this family grows fond of him because he has such an amicable personality that the family grows, again, fond of him, trusts him. He's made free, and he becomes kind of the teacher of the family's daughter, Celia, and he's a Christian, so he begins to teach Christianity to Celia. Now, at that point, again, the Christians are being persecuted. So the family learns about it. They don't like it. He is denounced. He is then sent to be killed, right? So he's sentenced to death along with his son, Cyrus, who is also a Christian. If you guys have read the book, and if this is not true, raise your hands.
No, it's something else.
Okay, because I didn't read this book. So Celia now, who is the daughter of the family, who is now converted to Christianity, she runs away because obviously she's also persecuted now for being a Christian, and she goes to Alexandria. She is guided by her discarnate grandfather, who is now also, of course, a follower of Jesus, and she joins a Christian community. And funny, she dresses like a man so that she's not identified. She takes on this personality, and she becomes known as a great benefactor, as a man. And later in life, her father, her own father, comes to see this man because he needs help. They meet, she helps him. She never reveals herself to him though. And that's how the book ends. I think she dies in the end too. In another book, Ave Christ, I think, and this research confused me a little bit, so if anyone has better information, help me here. I think he, in this book actually, we see him as at least 2 or 3 different incarnations. So apparently he is Quinto Varro, who is a Roman, a passionate Roman. Again, he feels that Christ brought a new message, but the Roman society is ignorant. So he fights to spread this word. There is a conspiracy against him. He knows that he's going to be killed. So he runs away, and he then changes, right? He disguises himself as a preacher in Lyon by the name of Brother Corvino, and he starts working as a gardener. Again, then he was going to be convicted to be beheaded, and his execution is suspended, and in the end, he dies in jail. Anyways, then in the book, he comes back 11 years later as Quinto Celso, and this child displays prodigious memory and great discernment. Again, a follower of Christ. This child now, as in his 14-year-old of age, he then is persecuted and is basically executed, set on fire as a Christian, right? So another tragedy. So you see that, I mean, these spirits have paved the way for us. I mean, see how much suffering, how much they had to do to spread the word of Christ so that we could be here and not being afraid of speaking about the Christ. But you see how much hard work had to be done. And in the same book, we see another incarnation of Emmanuel as the philosopher, or he was a student of philosophy. The name Basilio, around the year 233. He's son of Greek slaves. He lives in the island of Cyprus. He marries another slave, who by the name of Junia Glaura. They have a daughter, and the daughter is named Livia. Now, it's said that child is one of Chico Xavier's incarnations. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. Just passing on the information. He becomes a musical instrument tuner. He moves to Marseilles, and that's where Livia goes to school. And again, they are persecuted as Christians, and he dies being tortured in Lyon at a local church. Another tragedy. I know. Now on to more happier things. This information comes actually from Chico in one interview that he gave to in a TV program, Pinga Fogo, at TV Tupi, 1970. I don't know. I think I was 1 year old. I don't know. But Chico Xavier shares that Emmanuel incarnated as the Jesuit priest Manuel da Nóbrega, who was a great missionary in Brazil. He actually founded what is called the Pátio do Colégio, which was a school that then became the city of São Paulo. And he did that obviously in homage to Paul of Tarsus. And he also apparently he wrote the first book published in Brazil. So he's also the first author in Brazil. The book is named Letters from Brazil. So this is obviously a major initiative, a major accomplishment, and again, very interesting to see. And it also shows the devotion that Emmanuel has to Brazil. There's something interesting there, that he's very attached to the country. He has many, and obviously, because obviously he knew that Chico Xavier would incarnate there and they had all this work to do. But he's been working, planting the seeds in Brazil for a long time before Emmanuel would even be, would incarnate. In another book, Renunciation, now between the centuries 17 and 18, he shows us, right, a love story between Cirilo Davenport and Madalena Villamil, and this book takes places in different parts of the world, in France, Spain, and also the U.S. In this book, he is another priest. You can see again that a lot of these highly evolved spirits were members of the church, because that was what the church was supposed to be. Obviously, it didn't work quite well in the end, but they were all planting the seeds of true Christianity within the church. In this case, he is again Father Damien. He lives in Spain initially, then he goes to France, but he watches over this church, Church of St. Vincent. He carries with him new ideas. He fights any fanaticism within the church. He fights the Inquisition, and he already believes in immortality and reincarnation, or multiple lives. So you can see that he already embraced the Spiritist principles, many years before those principles would be formally revealed to Kardec through the Spirit of Truth. It shows how good of a man he was. It talks about once Madalena has a child and she runs away, she's persecuted, and he takes her in Paris, and that's where he dies at an old age. So he dies in the end again. So these books help us see the trajectory of Emmanuel, right? So these books bring, again, an account of the many lives that he has lived, working on his own development, living examples of Christianity every step of the way, preparing himself, redeeming himself from the choices that he didn't make in the past, taking advantage of every single incarnation to continue to work and prepare himself for a bigger, mission, right? That he would later come and be the guide of Chico Xavier. And then we see again the enormity of the work that has been left through the hands of Chico. All these books that reveal to us the interaction between spiritual life and incarnated life. But also he left many pieces of wisdom and many pieces of work that we use, right? They are daily doses of peace, encouragement, and wisdom. We use the book Our Daily Bread. I think we use all of them, and they are available here. I don't think all of them are translated, though. I couldn't find any. Well, these two are not, but this is The Pathway,
Yes,
The Truth.
Yes, the truth first.
Right. So,
First,
and this one we use, of course. Those are also great books for those of us who read Portuguese,
Are being translated.
and are being translated by Edicei of America.
National Spiritist Council.
Okay, of the International Spiritist Council. So, those are great pieces of work that show us how much Emmanuel understands of the word of the Christ. Some authors have deemed him to be the fifth evangelist, just because he connects the work of Kardec and the words of Christ so well that brings us an enormous amount of enlightenment that we would otherwise not be able to get so quickly and so fast. As a matter of fact, I think there has been some confusion around the works of Chico and Emmanuel. At some point within the Spiritist doctrine, some of us were saying that, well, we don't need to read Kardec anymore, because now we can just read the novels from Chico Xavier, and it's so much easier. But that is wrong, and we have to remember that Emmanuel himself deeply honored the work of Kardec all the way. Early on, when he reveals himself to Chico, he tells Chico, if I'm telling you anything that deviates from what Kardec left us, don't listen to me. That's the advice he gives to Chico. Say, we need to be faithful to the Spiritist doctrine. That's his mission. And to that end, interesting enough, if you analyze the work that he's left, he worked to celebrate every piece of work that Kardec left us. So, if you look at the Spirit's book, that is the foundation of the Spiritist doctrine, that was written in, or published, the second edition was published in 1860, the first one in 1857, but we consider the second edition to be the complete one. So that was published in 1860. 100 years later, a book is published by Chico through the dictation of Emmanuel, which is Religion of the Spirits. I believe this one is translated. I couldn't find it, but I've heard that it was translated. No?
It's on the list.
It's on the list. This book, basically, if you have read it, again, it's a celebration of the Spirit's book. It expands upon many of the questions that are brought to us in the Spirit's book. Likewise, if you look at the Medium's book, published in 1861, 100 years later, celebrating a century of that book, we get Theata of the Mediums. Not sure how to say that in English, but again, well, it's a book that expands upon, that builds upon what the Medium's book had brought to us 100 years before. So very clear correlation there.
I'm trying to find a word.
Don't worry. When you look at the Gospel according to Spiritism, 1864, 100 years later, we get the Book of Hope, Livro da Esperança, that, again, through the work of Emmanuel and Chico Xavier, again, revives, celebrates the Gospel as it was brought to us. So, very clearly, Emmanuel is very deeply committed to the work of Kardec. And then, finally, Heaven and Hell in 1865. One would think that the book would be published in 1965. Something went right, I guess, and it came ahead of schedule. It came in 1962, the book Divine Justice, that again expands upon the book Heaven and Hell. I know we don't have a book here for the Genesis, but André Luiz did leave us Evolution in Two Worlds, which is likewise is supposed to expand upon the Genesis. But it can be considered, of course, part of the work of Emmanuel anyways, because Emmanuel was guiding all of the work that Chico was doing. So it doesn't matter that it was through the dictation of André Luiz. Neat, isn't it?
Very neat.
And this is one famous clarification that Emmanuel provided to Chico, that Jesus is the door, Kardec the key. Right? So very clearly we can't get to Jesus, to understanding Jesus' words, without understanding the work that Kardec has left us. Now, in 1965, there's another interesting book for us Spiritists. It's called Study and Live, Studi e Viva, and it's really a call to action. It speaks to us, it speaks to what Spiritism is about, what the mission of Spiritism is, of the Spiritist Center, and of us individually. So, two little excerpts that I think are good examples of that call to action. So, Emmanuel says, educational institutions are erected throughout the earth, from elementary schools to universities, dedicated to professional specialization and science. Next to them, however, we find in the Spirit Center, the School of the Soul, which teaches us how to live. It reminds me of Conscious Living, right? The name of our group here, whose purpose is exactly that. So very much in line with what Emmanuel gives us here. And then, in the same book, he says, remember those, the nearly mad from suffering, and work to see that the Spiritist doctrine will offer them timely assistance. To that end, let us study Allan Kardec under the shining light of Jesus' words, and be it in example or in attitude, in action or words, let us remember that Spiritism calls us to a type of permanent charity, the charity of its own spreading or dissemination. And I thought of this when Anna was talking about the types of things we can do to help, right? And coming to the center, working in Spiritism is a great charity. It is a great charity. So like you said, and through the words of Emmanuel, spreading Spiritism is charity, is permanent charity. And I want to close by reminding us that Emmanuel was also part of that group of spirits that organized the codification of Spiritism, the spirit of truth. And we see in the Gospel according to Spiritism a message, number 11, called selfishness. So if I may, I'm going to read. It's in 2 slides so that we can hear the words of Emmanuel. He must have a better voice than my voice, but still, bear with me. I hope I can do justice. So Emmanuel says, selfishness, the plague of all humanity, is hindering moral progress and must disappear from the earth. It has been reserved for Spiritism to make this planet ascend in the hierarchy of the worlds. So selfishness is the target at which all believers should point their arms, towards which all strength and courage should be directed. I say courage because this will be greatly needed by each individual if they are to triumph over themselves rather than triumph over others. Therefore, let each one of us use all their strength to combat their own selfishness, certain that this monstrous devourer of all intellects, this offspring of pride, is the cause of all the miseries found in this world. It's a denial of charity and consequently the greatest obstacle to human happiness. Jesus gave us an example of charity and Pontius Pilate an example of selfishness. While the first, the just one, was about to traverse the holy stations of his martyrdom, the second was washing his hands and saying, "What does it matter to me?" He even asked the Jews, "This is a just man, so why do you want to crucify him?" Nevertheless, he allowed them to continue to conduct Jesus to his execution. Due to the antagonism between charity and selfishness, that leprous invasion of the human heart, Christianity has still not completely carried out all of this mission. It is to you who are the new apostles of the faith that the superior spirits are giving orientation, unto whom rests the responsibility and the duty to eradicating this evil, so as to give Christianity its full force, which will allow it to clear the way of all obstacles that hinder its progress. Expel selfishness from the earth, so it may ascend in the scale of the worlds, seeing that the time has arrived for humanity to vest its virile garments. But for this to happen, it is first necessary that selfishness be expelled from all hearts. Emmanuel, Paris, 1861. Well, that's it. Thank you very much.